Welcome back. I've got Gary Cohen on the line. Gary, how are you?
I am great today. You catch me in the mountains. I'm in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and it's just beautiful here.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful part of our country for sure. So, real looking forward to this conversation. I want you to share a little bit about you and the work you do in the mountains and when you're not in the mountains.
Yeah, well, my career got started with ACI Telecentrics. We grew it from two of us and $4,000 to 2,200 people, taking it public, and grew it about 50% compounded annually, year over year for the first 10 years or so. So that was an exciting start. But then I found myself writing a book called Just Ask Leadership. Why Great Managers Always Ask the Right Questions. And that came from recognizing that I did a lot more question asking than telling by the end. By the end is the operative part of that. And so went on sabbatical, wrote the book, and then coaching found me. And now I've been coaching for 20 years. It's hard to believe. I've been coaching longer than I did my first part of my career, which was growing that business.
It's amazing how time flies. And you look back and you go, wow, I've actually been doing this longer than, like you said, the career of, birthing that company and growing it and continuing to grow it and all of that. And you look back and go, it's like a smaller percentage of your overall life, but it was such an important part of your life where it feels bigger than
Yeah.
it actually is. And I get that too, and several facets of my career. Where it's like, oh yeah, I feel like I did that for such a long time, but then I look at it in the grand scheme of things, like that was just a small section of my life. But wow, it's strange how that works. But no, it's good, and coaching is definitely an area that is desperately needed, has been for a very long time and continues to be so. And even in today's marketplace, and I know you see the stats with, engagement at work or the lack thereof, and just the challenges that we're seeing in the workforce. I think the need for coaching has never been greater, not just for leadership, but for everybody involved.
Yeah. I think that's right. And yeah, the statistics are really well pounded out there, aren't they, around the disengagement. And I think that the way we look at it at CO2, and I personally look at it, is that there's two elements, and have a book on one of them and another book coming out on the other. And the first is around just asking. If you want people engaged, you need to engage them and stop doing the telling and start doing the asking. And like if you think about it from a identity standpoint, we were both students once, and we probably identified ourselves as students. But then we entered the workplace and we no longer identify as students. You know, I'm a this or I'm a that. We all transition from one identity to another. And so the call out for leaders today is to transition from the teller to the asker and really change their identity as it relates to it. So whenever I find myself in a diatribe on a topic, I'm like, oh God, there I go. And it's like, but I'm an asker. So what's the question I need to ask to get the thing rolling in a different way, to get the person engaged in a different way? What have you found as it relates to this?
Oh, I'm completely on the same page with you. And I often refer to this healthcare organization that I took over. This is talking about the time thing 11 years ago. And it seems like yesterday that I started there, but and I was there for a little over 4 years. But again, it was such a huge undertaking for me because I was with another healthcare organization and the opportunity came up for this one. And it was a parallel move. So it wasn't, a move where, it was a promotion per se, but I left an organization that was relatively stable. We'd streamlined a lot of things and things were going well. And I took over an organization that was averaging about 90% turnover every year. And no, it wasn't a McDonald's. These are master's level and above clinicians,
Wow.
physicians leaving en masse year after year. And I knew the reputation of the organization because I knew the interim leader that was in there that was brought in after the original leader was unceremoniously thrown out the door, and that was a mess in itself. But won't go into that. But ultimately, it was a uh, toxic. If you look up in the dictionary, there'd probably be a picture of that organization. And I thought, yeah, let's leave this comfortable spot and let's go into that. And I never said I was smart, but the thing I saw was here's an opportunity. There's an opportunity. Let's see if I can figure out what's going on here and maybe improve it because the area that that organization was in was an underserved area that needed a lot of help. The
So what'd you
community,
do?
I asked questions. I went
Mm,
in and I sat down with everybody and I asked them from their point of view because I'm the new guy here. I'm still trying to figure out what the code is to the second floor bathroom. I'm like, what is your viewpoint on why we've had so many people go? And everybody shared, and I just was in there, and okay. And I asked them, if you were in my seat, what would you do first? And I didn't say what would you do. I said, what would you do first? What would be some of the things? And thankfully, I they trusted me from the beginning, which was really nice, and that's a rarity in many cases. But I think it was how I approached it and how I was presented. I'm like, I don't want to see this. This is hard on everybody. When you have all of your colleagues leaving year after year, I'd like for you to stick around a while. What has to be the environment here for that to be a possibility? And so they all gave me some great advice, some better than others, but there was a lot of things that I took and I went to the board and I said, this is what we'd like to try. And I had the green light to do so, and I did it. And
and
then
what was the outcome?
the outcome was after a year, the turnover rate was reduced from 86% to 6%.
Wow.
And I didn't Jack Welch and dehire a bunch of people either. There was just a
You ask
couple.
questions and you listen deeply.
Yeah, and I,
Yeah.
and there was some ideas and suggestions that were easy for us to implement, and I implemented them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the employees go, "We asked for something and we got it."
Right.
And there wasn't any conditions to it. Well, we'll do this, but you're going to have to do this. No,
Right.
I didn't put conditions on it. I asked them what would make it easier for them to be the best that they could be, and they did it.
So,
And
Michael, this is exactly what we find in our coaching, which is when we help the leader move from that identity of I know the answer to I don't know. I have curiosity, I have wonder. I actually like wonder better than curiosity because it's less edgy. It's more like open, you know, and and they start listening deeper. And when they start listening deeper and listening to what the troops, the people they lead are looking for, uh, it changes that dynamic of I know that you're out there doing the good fight to help people get engaged and stop burning out because that's an exhausting way to be in life is burned
oh yeah.
out.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's not fun. And it went from an organization that had all the turnover, toxic communication issues to a collaborative environment to the point where, I followed up with that over time saying, okay, what are you seeing? What are some of the issues that the patients are bringing forth to you when they come in? I don't want to know names. I don't want to know, it's like healthcare privacy. I'm a huge advocate for it. I don't want to know, but just is there any overarching things that you're seeing in the community and some challenges that aren't currently being met in the community? And they came up some ideas, and I said, well, let's see if we can either do something internally or maybe partner with a neighborhood organization and see if we can address some of that. So we did, and it went from a toxic cesspool of a place to us giving presentations at healthcare conferences on what we're doing.
That
And
must sound great.
it was, and I took zero credit for it. I probably should have taken a little bit more than that, but I won't. No, their ideas. I just opened up the right doors, and talk to the right people in order to make it happen because I wanted that for our community. I want, just like when you're working with individuals or teams or you're coaching somebody, I want them to be the best version of them and what their definition is, not mine. I'm not going to prescribe to tell, even my kids, okay, what I want you to do when you grow up. I want you to be what you want to be. And you have every right to change your mind if you'd like. I
Right.
certainly have. You just create that environment where they have the authority and also the accountability to themselves to follow through on things. And it was interesting to see the transformation, and even talking with some of the physicians and the board, and they're like, we're a different organization, but there's the same people here. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
that's ideally what you want, because I've seen organizations go through clean house and all of a sudden they bring in a new roster of people and, well, wow, we're having the same problems. What's this all about? Maybe go look in the mirror. It could be how you're leading, or the how things are set up here. It's
Yeah.
the evidence is there. You just sometimes have to look at it, and many times leaders and employees, both, maybe a little too close, or they're not willing to. And I love how you mentioned this a moment ago. They don't have that wonder gene
Yeah. Yeah.
working. They're just kind of focused, and we do this. This is how we do it. Oh, okay.
That's
Well,
right.
how's it
Yeah.
working for you? And it doesn't seem to be. Okay. Well, maybe we could think about something else.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on another area that I feel passionate about, and so passionate that I never thought I'd write a second book, but now I'm writing one with co-author Rob Bedore, who ran Proto Labs, which is a digital manufacturing company. And we're writing on the topic of on the hook. And the idea is, how do you get employees to feel on the hook in a good way? So some people associate with on the hook is bad. In our connotation, it's good. It's they're engaged because they're on the hook. And what we're finding is this, and it has not been written about in this way yet, which is permission giving and permission seeking. As leaders, so many leaders, and I was included in this, love giving permission and saying yes. And I earn my way up to a place where I get to decide and give permission. The problem is every time you give permission, you take away the employee being on the hook. They're off the hook because if you agreed with them, right? Then if it doesn't turn out, what's the most likely outcome? Well, I just did what you said, or you agreed with me, right? If it's a win, then they feel a little less like it was them, right? Because you took part of that away when you gave permission. Now, if we reverse it and we look at it from the employee standpoint, like they definitely want your permission. Why? Because they're off the hook, right? If it doesn't turn out, so they don't have the same level of engagement in the work. And so, a lot of leadership is talking to the individual about how to lead. And this model is a little more complicated and yet simple, which is you both have to stop the permission seeking from the employee standpoint and stop the permission giving from the leader standpoint. So it's a double, it's two sides of the same coin, right? Which is, doesn't matter which side you're on, it's not helping. And so what we're doing from a coaching standpoint is we're coaching people to see, and they actually use the words, which is kind of fun, which is you're on the hook for this, right? Because it shortcuts all the other stuff. I'm not going to tell you what you're going to do. I trust you. I believe in you. Now, the important part is that there's guardrails, right? Um, and when you have guardrails, then why are they coming? In other words, they have a role, job description, accountability matrix, authority matrix. So the employee already has these things in place, right? And so why are they coming? to you for permission. And the permission might be a nod, it might be a wink, it might be a nod. Any of those things get in the way of them being on the hook. So that, how, based upon your experience, how does that play out for
I
you?
love it. I love it. It reminds me somewhat, and I forget the organization. I'm sure there's a lot of them that'll do it where they'll say, okay, each department is allocated a certain budget amount, and you can do whatever you want. Might be, I don't think it's 3M, but it sounds like something 3M would do because they're all about innovation and creating things we didn't know we needed. Kind of like what Apple has done over the years. And it's like, I didn't know we needed a post-it note. Oh, well, how many billion of those things we go through now? But it reminds me of this. Here's, and even a budget is restricting. It's kind of a
Is
permission thing. So I'm looking at this and going, all right, do this. No, that's still adding some restrictions or permission based. It's just like even even a department, you run this department in a way that is kind of a restriction kind of thing.
it is, and we see that as the guardrails, right?
Yeah.
It's like how if everybody just had open-ended budgets and they could just free for all, it'd be a free for all, it would be chaos. So our view is like those things are in place. They are the guardrails. And the only thing as the leader is to help the people see that there are guardrails. But outside of that, they're free to move. Like free to move. They don't have to ask you permission because they have the guardrails. They know what a budget is. They can move something from one side of the budget to another, but they still have to stay within their guardrails. But why are they seeking out this permission? And it's so parental and so disengaging. So I'm thinking about the message that you put forward around the disengagement of people, the burnout of people. They burn out because they're being squashed, right? And they're being treated like children rather than adults who already have full permission to do what they need to do.
Yeah, and it's going back to that healthcare situation when, I asked, it was some mental health workers, to come up with some new programming. And they said, "What's the framework?" And I said, "Well, preferably something to do with mental health, but you're the ones that see things, you know, run with it. Um, design it, you know." And there was, kind of a guardrail, kind of thinking about it now. So just when you think it's ready to go, let's go over it, go over the, how you plan to roll it out. If I see any ideas that might be, help streamline it, or maybe an additional thing you didn't think of, we'll do it, but run with it. And, ended up being a poster presentation at a conference that they did. They came up with it. I just said, go do it.
Yeah,
And you're the ones meeting with the patients, not me. I see them in the hallway or in the
right.
waiting room, but I'm not in those rooms. I don't know what challenges they're facing. I do, just based on society and the environment and the community and all that. I knew some of the overarching challenges that people could be facing, but not specific to that individual. But they did. And again, I think going back in, ownership and engagement, and like we said a few minutes ago, it's like, if you want to help with engagement, you engage. And that's what I did. I engaged them. It wasn't, this hierarchy. I purposely, and this is just, I think about this from past leaders that I've worked for and with, you borrow little things. Like, I'm going to take a little ingredient of that one, some ingredients from that one, and just kind of shape it into your own leadership style. And for me, one of the things was, okay, here's your role. Here's where things are. Here's how to get a hold of me. I don't care when you come in. I don't care when you leave. If you get everything done that you need to do, great, awesome. Have a good time. Have fun here. Let me know if you need anything. And I talk about a playground. Like,
Yeah,
what? Okay. And then all of a sudden, it's like, all right, I make sure that I'm being held I hold myself accountable and not blow off because I recognize that, in that situation, and that was a quarter century ago when I had that conversation with my boss. I remembered even then, earlier in my career, going, okay, this is not normal. Do not mess this up, Mike. You step up and do your best, and I did. And from awards that I received through work and bonuses and things like that, apparently I was doing something okay. But I was motivated, engaged, and disciplined to do it. And there were days where I certainly didn't feel like it, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna take ownership of this. And I think that is I think a lot of people, a lot of employees want to feel like they own something, but if they're getting squashed and you have to use this type of pencil, holding it at this angle to do something, they're like, wait a minute, this feels like, I'm being, tutored by, the really tough teacher in school again. No, I don't want that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think employees have to stop waiting for permission and realize they already are on the hook, right? And therefore don't go seek it out. And the bosses need to recognize the opposite of that, that the employee's already on the hook and they're taking them off the hook every time they come in and give the nod, the wink, the yeah, that's a great idea. And it's really hard because you want to say things like that. And I'm sure we all learned that in management 101, be positive. But what I like saying is it's not about being positive about the idea, it's being positive about the outcome. So when they come back and say, hey, that thing we talked about that you wouldn't give me any wink nod for, yeah, it was a huge success. And then that's when you pour it on. You pour it on the outcome, not on the idea, because the idea simply is going to take away from the brilliance that shows up when it lands.
Yeah, I love that. Reminds me, years and years ago, I worked as a consultant for a division of it was Daimler Benz at the time, and we were in the asset management division. So what we did is we worked with Fortune 500 companies, and we went in and we helped them with their asset management inventory because most organizations have no idea how many desks or computers or anything like that. They acquire them over time, but they're not really good at tracking all of them, which accountants absolutely despise because they want a true accounting of everything you own. So, long story short, we did this work for clients and whatnot. And at the end of every consultant meeting, we'd bring in the partners and the team, and then there was usually a handful of people from another team that had nothing to do with the project at all. They didn't know anything
Hmm.
about it. They knew the name, but they didn't know anything else. And we would share, what went well, what blew up, and we'd get insights from especially the outsiders that knew nothing and say, well, what about this and what about that? And what it ended up doing is by implementing this type of celebration, basically at the end of a project, um, we got a lot more efficient at things and we improved and we could actually take on an additional 20% of work or client work without
Well,
bringing on any additional consultants. Needless to say, that made some people back in Germany pretty happy, because we're like, wow, you guys are expanding business by 20% and you didn't bring on any people. Well, how
yeah,
did that work? And we talked. Sometimes it's the simple solution that causes the biggest effect, and
yeah.
it did. And I carried that through in whenever I had any type of end of project or completion of projects, like, okay, what went well? What challenges did you run into? Any
Like an after
insights?
action report.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I what I found was a lot of organizations that I worked for after that never did that. And I was like, why aren't we? We could learn some things and get better at what we're doing. But no, they just no, we do it next. And it's like, no, there's lost opportunity here. And also engagement, and
Mm.
bringing in people. So it's, a lot of ingredients along the way that I've picked up that have, paid big dividends for me, and just also in advising people and just looking at things going, okay, what are you doing about this? Like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. What's the outcome you're hoping for on this? Okay. And just, again, approach it, with a state of wonder. I'm like a 5-year-old kid going, how does this work? And
Yes. Yes.
and it's one of those skill sets that I hope I never lose.
How do you remind yourself to stay in a state of wonder when you get caught, catched by something?
Yeah, for me, I'll, and thankfully I'm a lot better in tune with how I feel from a physical standpoint than I used to be earlier in my life. So if I feel tense or, a little bit tightness in my chest or not necessarily shortness of breath, but if I'm feeling tense about something, I'm like, okay, there's something here that I'm needing to understand or learn about. So let's step off of the this is how you should do it soapbox and go and paraphrasing, I gotta ask some more questions because I'm going into this thinking I know everything, which is danger, Will Robinson. Don't go into anything like that. Go into there like, I don't want to say you don't know anything, but at least ask the questions so you know, okay, this is the tool I need to grab, and okay, this tool might work here, or hmm, okay, that brings up some additional things that I'm wondering about, and it helps you actually provide, better guidance, or even just, being a good person to listen to a situation. Even sometimes we just listen. We're not there to offer any advice or guidance. We're just there to listen. And it helps a lot just by checking yourself and knowing yourself, because it's easy to. I mean, we can go into autopilot real easy as leaders and as individuals. We can just say, yep, and listen to maybe 2% of what the other person said. Don't do that with your spouse, kids. Just a side note. Um, because divorce attorneys are expensive. And there's a reason why a colleague of mine who's been divorced more than once. He said, you know why divorce attorneys are so expensive? I don't know why. Because they're worth it. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get it. I don't like it, but I understand where you're coming from.
So there's this tool that we developed after first book was out, and it's called Peak Leadership. And the idea is that we, um, unbeknownst to all of us, I think, is that we ask questions in these two dimensions. One is perspective or evaluation. So opening up wide or closing it down, or knowledge or action. We thought that what we were going to find was that people asked in one of those four dimensions, right? And it turns out that they don't. They actually ask questions, kind of a two-footed question in the quadrants. For example, a professor, we named the style professor, is takes perspective and knowledge. So it's usually historic or current, okay, in the question. What's somebody else doing in this field around this, right? That would be a professor question. The innovator question would be perspective and action. Uh, how could we take advantage of that, right? So we could go from the professor to the innovator and move right to action. That's where I sit. We can go back to the quadrant in the bottom left, which is the judge, and the judge asks questions about evaluation and knowledge. What are the three things we did wrong here, and why won't that work? Right. So that's the judge, and then we move to the I always think of COO, but it's the director, and the director is asking evaluative questions of action. What are the three things we could do in priority rank order that could make this just work? And so you could see that each of these gives a different dimension, but here's the real realization. that many of us just sit in our quadrant, right? So that means we're asking 25% of the available questions to us. And imagine just knowing the model, how you could start to expand, because it's not like a Myers-Briggs or a DISC where they say you're stuck in it, right? This is, you can grow, you can move quadrants, and you can deliberately do it. And what I'd say is for all the guests, we would be happy. We don't sell this, it's on our website. I hired people who put together Stephen Covey's 360 and Wilson Learning's uh, quadrant model to build this with us. And it takes 7 minutes to do yourself. It's much better in a 360 form. There literally, there is no cost. We are not going to chase you. It, I decided I wasn't very good at selling assessments. So it used to cost money. And I'm like, no, we're just going to give this to the world.
No, it's gracious of you to do so, and I highly encourage people take that 7 minutes and then roll it back. Because just thinking about that, you start asking questions from different angles and perspectives or quadrants. All of a sudden, you're asking better questions, which by nature will get you better answers, and those better answers, quite frankly, would make your organization stronger, and the products and services that you provide will be better. Doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur of a couple people or a Fortune 500 company or anywhere in between. It's critically important to leverage everything you can to be the best version of you, which society always benefits from that. And so, Gary, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
CO2coaching.com, or they can look me up, GaryBCohen.com. Either one will get you there. But CO2 coaching, there's books, resources. You can learn more about the company and what we do.
Yeah, some great resources on that site. So I highly encourage people to check it out, and I'll definitely have it in the show notes. So, Gary, thanks again for being on the show today. Really loved our conversation.
Thanks for the time.